All right. Should be coming up.
Yes, they are, but you need to go to full screen now. So start your slideshow, please.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name's Ken Hutnik. I am down in Amherstburg, Ontario, which is just south of Windsor on the far west side of the division, almost in the Detroit River. Amherstburg was the terminus of the Canada Southern when it was first created, and then a stop on the Michigan Central. And the original 1896 Michigan Central station still stands as an art gallery, gift shop, museum, heritage site. So if you're ever in the area, it's a beautiful piece of architecture and station to check out. So today I'm going to talk about an overview of micro layouts, what they are, why you might want to build one. Do a quick tour of my own that if we would have been in person, I was going to just kind of walk through it. So we'll do kind of a picture tour, but not to spend a whole bunch of slides just on those layouts. I have some other examples, inspiration to share. And then I'll just summarize with, key points again, and then talk about where you can get some other information about micros and some inspiration if you're interested even more. So micro layouts are small model railroads, usually less than 3 or 4 square feet in area, that nonetheless have a clear purpose and an excellent operating capability. Now that definition from Carl is, Carl's actually considered kind of the grandfather of micro layouts in getting them out to mainstream many years ago. Not everyone agrees on the 4 square foot area. Like many things in the hobby, people want to debate, but in the end, he was a proponent of do things in less space and be creative and build smaller, detailed scenes rather than larger layouts. And in the little photo here was his square foot estate railway in G scale. So this little garden railway depicts a scene in the UK of a small railway, someone using garden tractors and dumpers to do things around the property, which is a big type of prototype driver for a lot of people across the world, smaller railways from estates. And layouts can be built in anywhere from Z scale or smaller, and then in this case, G and even higher. People are building very large layouts in big scales, just building smaller scenes. They've been very popular in Europe and Asia for a long time. They've been gaining popularity in North America, even though that there were articles published in mainstream magazines many years ago. We're seeing more and more of them. And of course, with multimedia, Facebook, and all the other networking sites, you can find other people that are doing similar interests and go to meet other people. Your modeling focus shifts from compressing vast scenic landscapes into smaller detailed vignettes. And those things are 2 things we've talked about as modelers, and trying to put many, many miles of main line into a layout, and then as well finding ways to detail certain scenes, and so that you have a very interesting layout to look at and operate. With micros, narrow gauge is quite popular, and that's because with its smaller equipment and tighter radius curves, you can cram more, so to speak, onto the layout. And some of the examples here will show kind of how that really plays into modeling smaller scenes and interesting scenes nonetheless. So why would you want to build a micro layout? Well, they're especially useful for people getting started in the hobby. They're a shorter time to complete because it's physically smaller, budget friendlier because you're building smaller, and then you can learn and improve your skills in a small space rather than taking on the daunting basement empire or bigger layout. But also they're great for taking a break from your basement empire or your regular modeling, and it allows you to do something smaller, highly detailed, and maybe even finish it. It's easy to store, they're portable, they can be taken to shows or meets, and it allows you to try different prototypes or scales, scenery types, etc., that may be different from your usual modeling that interests you, but you don't want to commit an entire layout to explore it. You get lots of enjoyment and opportunity from trying something different and exploring it and not having put a lot of time and effort into it. If it doesn't work out, that's okay. You tried, it was something different. And then from that, you probably have everything in hand that you need. Many of us have basement closets or bedroom closets full of kits and other things that were on the someday list. Well, now you can take some of those out and actually use them and build something. There are many types of micro layouts that you may hear of and ways to explore modeling. I'm not going to read them all off the slide here. You can kind of take a look. But what's important to me on the far right is that it allows you to explore things that you might not otherwise do on your layout or within that prototype, or you're scared of and you don't want to commit to putting it on your quote permanent layout. But you can try it and build some type of micro layout that is, testing these things, exploring them and playing around with it. And really, layouts can be very prototypical. Because modelers are not building a large scene doesn't mean they're prototypical. Modelers are very, very detailed scenes of, stations, industries, and making them completely prototypical to an era or to location, as well as people doing totally freelance things. And then what's interesting, and I'll share a few pictures, is they're doing very whimsical and mythical things. Things that are just funny, not prototypical at all, but can be enjoyable. And especially at a show or a display, people, the general public, kids love things that are unique, that are different, and just provides a new facet of enjoying the hobby. In micro layouts, there's some design elements, much like designing your full-scale layout, let's say, that allow you to fit things onto the layout, move rolling stock and cars, and save some space. Be it turntables to change locos and cars around and change directions, traversers or transfer tables to move between tracks, sector plates to redirect cars and engines across track, heavy use of staging and hiding things off stage behind buildings, behind backdrops and view blocks. Fiddle yards and fiddle sticks allow you to move cars on and off the layout with your hands, the old hand of God or 050 switcher. Or you can use cassettes to move locomotives and trains on and off your small layouts. Using these, designing them, making them work could probably be a presentation on its own. So I'm just going to show some of these design elements in the examples and talk about them and some of the types of layouts and examples, which is easier than just showing you track plans or drawings done by hand. The first type of layout is a round and round. It's called roundy roundy. It's quite probably the most favorite type of layout, especially for people overseas that are displaying layouts, taking them to meets. It's the basic loop of track. It can be a perfect circle like a pizza. And basically, you run the trains round and round for pure enjoyment. It can be used especially for Christmas layouts where people put them on a table, but quite under the tree, be a little small for that. But a very popular way to display trains, run trains, and try scenery while just letting the trains run. Also popular is single line of track. It's, as it says, just moving trains back and forth without any switches or loops. Many people construct a certain type of scenery, say a Rocky Mountain cliff, the deserts of Colorado, different things, and they just want to run trains through the scenery to show off rolling stock, to show off scenery. It could be a hidden loop behind the backdrop that brings the train through, or they run it from staging to staging. but a very simple way. And in this case, this gentleman built a pier in the UK that transported people to the edge of the pier waiting for their ships and then able to ride a merry-go-round as well. A very popular also type of micro layout is switching layouts. Endless hours of fun switching cars, and they can just be done ad hoc or through a variety of rules and objectives. On the right's a tuning fork, what's called. It's a simple one switch on the layout usually, and you switch cars between an industry, the main line, in and out of staging. A very simple way to enjoy switching cars. The bottom left is an overview of what's called an Inglenook. It's a track plan that they say is almost about 100 years old when it was first published as an idea for a layout. And basically with 3 tracks and a bunch of cars, you start with cars in the 2 side tracks, and then by casting dice, pulling rail cards, whatever random method, you design a game where you resequence those cars. And the objective is to take your switcher and switch the cars in the proper order onto the 3rd sighting and be ready, in this case, to go off-site into staging or around the layout. And then the time saver, made popular here in North America as well by John Allen, is also very popular. People have made layouts on it, scenicked it, and worked with it to be its own kind of micro within the 4 feet of square space. Heavy industrial prototypes are common, but I've also seen very country type layouts switching around barns, cattle pens, etc. So another way to enjoy micros and have a variety of switching to do and operate. I mentioned that micro layouts are very popular with narrow gauge. And when I first started with micros during the pandemic, I heard all types of designations of scale, gauges, and it was very confusing. So I'm not going to read you this chart. It'll be available in the presentation, the video, but you know, narrow gauge HO scale, narrow gauge O scale in 3 different flavors, and G scale narrow gauge are very popular amongst micros and can enable trains to turn in very tight radiuses. And I'll have some examples showing that. And basically, this also allows you with different scales and gauges to cheat on using track from another scale to run your bigger scale trains on. The ties aren't always the exact proper length or the right spacing, but many people will construct a micro and simply scenic over the ties with dirt and gravel and ballast, and you'll never notice that you're using a different scale track for your micro. You can also purchase track, insert in these gauges that are very popular, or hand lay it. And then also, you know, you can use standard gauges of track and locomotives and stock and build your micro in a standard gauge as well. So now let's talk about a few of my micros and what I did as examples of all this. It's better to, you know, walk through some examples than to just talk through the theory of it and display some pictures. So the first one is Queen's Quay. It was my first micro that I built, started during the pandemic when the COVID lockdowns were in effect. I had heard of micros, I had seen it, and then kind of said, well, you know, why don't I give it a try, since, like many of you, I'm sitting in the basement with some modeling time on hands. It is HO narrow, HO standard gauge. It's only 48 inches by 12 inches. I used a handheld throttle, which is pulse width modulation. And that is, a long story short, a way that DC voltage is applied to the rails through a pulse square wave, rather than just increasing a potentiometer and applying voltage to the rails. It's set out in late 1970s. I did use a sector plate and traverser and a cassette through those design elements, and I'll show those. I put some LED lighting overhead to make it kind of self-encased. Developed some simple sound effects using an MP3 speaker. And despite its small size, I can operate it. I operate it either doing car swap, or I just come up to the layout and I swap one box car for another box car for wherever it is. I used a switch list generator I created in first in Excel and then to Google Docs based upon some work that others have done online. And it just simply, you tell it where you've got cars in the layout and it will tell you if you pick them up, swap them out, or leave them. And then probably my favorite way to operate it is just ad hoc, where I just step up and move some cars around and enjoy just running the layout, turn on the sound effects, and have some fun. Here's an overview of the layout and a solid picture with the kind of the display below the track plan that gave me the inspiration from it that came from Carl's site. On the far left is a wharf that houses a crane in a single spot for a car. Next is a manufacturing factory for machinery that not only acts as an industry with two spots for cars, but the track passes through it in a sector plate. And I can then switch through two more tracks, through a warehouse with two tracks, and then out to two car aprons on the far right, and where I can move cars back and forth on the layout, on and off the layout, as part of the switching operations. All of this is 4 feet, except the little barge extends a little more off the 4 feet. And overhead is the LED lighting, and I used a Cricut cutter to do the vinyl lettering for Queen's Key. And that's kind of like the overall presentation of the layout. So some of the design elements that help make operations possible in this small space is under the factory on the left, I have a sector plate hidden. It's a piece of thick cardboard with track mounted on it. 2 wires come up through the baseboard, and it simply pivots between the 2 tracks in the back that allows you access to the wharf on the left. And in doing that, it has 2 different positions to pass cars through. And how I achieved moving it is hard to see in the first picture, but in the bottom one, there's a little drain pipe detail coming out of the wall of the wharf. And when I pull that pipe, it just engages through a pin and some wiring the sector plate and switches it to the next track, and then push it back in, and I'm back in the second or the first choice. Some of the black things in the background are just view blocks, so that you can't see into the building, the empty shell of the building, and you don't see these wires in the back of the building, which are all the electrical connections. The car float on the far right is also an element and a traverser, kind of like a transfer table for locomotives and car shops. And it also serves as a cassette. So basically there are 2 tracks in the back of the warehouse and 2 tracks on the barge. Attached to those, or hanging off the edge of those, are rail joiners, and simply with little feet, felt feet underneath a piece of extra benchwork, I can pull apart the car from the track, move it over left to right, and I can switch any 2 of these tracks with the locomotive and the boxcar on it, and move to each one of these tracks for the switching. And that allows me then to do runaround moves for those cars and switch them to either industry and then back and forth, but also spot cars, the back of the warehouse, spot cars at the front of the warehouse, 2 different spots in both cases. Also, to make it convenient for moving cars on and off the layout, at the end of the barge, closer up here in the bottom left, the bumpers I scratch built actually have a Katy coupler mounted inside of them. So I can actually couple a car to the barge, pick up this whole unit and move it to a different table and take the cars off of it, swap cars onto it, carry it back to the layout, re-engage it in one of the tracks, and then using the simple pick tool, undo the couplers and let the switcher take the car off the barge. The barge itself was scratch built out of some pieces of wood, styrene, bits and bobbits, and lightly weathered. So what I found with Queen's Key, and going back to some of my earlier points about why you'd want to build a micro, despite building something in only 4 square feet, there are a lot of things that I had never done before in my modeling that it allowed me to do. I built a micro. All right, that's self-evident. I use gator foam bench work, never worked with the PWM throttle. And you can read, through a lot of these, but what is really key is that if I wouldn't have built this little micro, I probably wouldn't have tried many of these yet. And it kind of forced me to go ahead and try them. And, given again, it's a small space, I was not concerned if it didn't quite work out right because I wasn't building a large basement layout, relying on that seam to always be there for the rest of the life of the basement layout. So definitely it was worthwhile. I learned a lot. I had a lot of fun. And being only 4 feet, I measured the height and width to make sure I could fit it in my small car. And I've actually taken this to a couple of local shows and exhibited it and ran it and allowed people to run cars on it for fun. So it's been a great project and very rewarding with some firsts that really made it a sealed in that I really enjoyed doing micros. And then it was time to move on to another micro. The Candle Barn was another micro that I started in the COVID lockdown. And the idea was, I'm going to try something else and I'm going to do it as a gift for a family member who was living out of town at the time. And if I got it to her, she'd have a little piece of home with her. And so I kind of got started. I had seen and read about this narrow gauge HON 30, which is basically HO running on very narrow tracks, equivalent of N scale or 30-inch rails. I had seen people working with 8x10 artist panels and bigger and making small layouts and using them as bench work. So I thought I'd give that a try. I had worked with the PWM throttle and I decided now I just make this whole layout battery powered. I detailed the interior of the barn shop and then used a variety of figures to represent family members and pets to make it more of a reflection of home and family for my family member who was living on her own away from town during the pandemic. Despite being small, I fit 9 figures representing family members and 9 animals representing pets and animals that family members had. I took it out and took some photos by the river, and these kind of give you an overview of it. And the bottom left, kind of sitting on a table, shows you kind of the relative size of 8x10. The back has got some more animals, some more people, and actually in the back of the barn here, a little gentleman wrestling with a raccoon is actually me, representing me. And then some other little vignettes. I have my nephew fishing, a friend of the family studying for her bar exam for lawyers with a little book, another family member driving a tractor, and the custom-made HON 30 truck that has barrels of candle wax on it, travels around the layout. And where the theme came from is the family member I sent it off to was exploring making candles as her hobby in her spare time, buying materials, buying wax as needed. So I thought, I'll make this into her own little store. And just to go back, this is her talking to a customer who's arrived to buy a candle. The interior, can't really see it in this lighting, is detailed with an old Tyco general store kit, which I had painted up. There's a cat, there's a dog, there's 2 horses, there's 2 birds. So a fun micro, giving that to a family member. It was my first micro I had finished. So at this time, it was actually a break from Queen's Key, which was a larger project as I worked through rolling stock and other things. It's a roundy. I'd use the artist wood panel as bench work. I kit bashed the truck from an HO scale Walther's Ford C truck, and I put a Kato N scale drive underneath it. So it runs on a typical N scale track and runs on the battery power that's hidden inside the barn. Barn's also got some LED lighting, interior store details, and I also did a custom acrylic dust cover. Just had someone, relative that was able to cut some acrylic for me. I measured it up, and it has its own dust cover to keep the dust off it while it sits on the desk. And fortunately, when sharing this on Facebook groups I'm part of, Otto, the publisher RMC, reached out to me and said, "Hey, I could use this for the magazine. Would you write it up for us?" And I was happy to, was shocked and excited. So I wrote it up, and after it got through their publishing process, he reached out to me and said, "Here it comes." So I'm fortunate enough to be able to share that work and that idea with the magazine and everyone that reads. Next layout is Downtown Christmas. It's a loop of track that was inspired from a idea to create a Christmas micro for the sake of having a Christmas display. And so, relying on my previous successes so far, I said, let's give it a try. And I came up with the idea of using this old Walther's kit that I had. It was built, but I had no home for it, no space for it, and decided to then go ahead and build it into a micro. So I built it as well as HON30, so HO scale with a narrow gauge drive. I built it to 1 square foot, 8 inches by 18 inches. It is, again, a PWM throttle, and it's also battery powered. So the batteries are hidden inside the buildings and used to drive the trolley and the LED lighting. I kit bashed the trolley from an old Bachmann cable car, added some constant lighting using some capacitors that work well with the PWM throttle. Detailed some interior rooms using some kits that I had gotten off eBay 15, 20 years ago before, I'm not sure if it's Woodland Scenics or someone else makes those roomettes now, back before those were popular. And the lighting, and also did another custom acrylic case to protect it from dust and from prying hands when I'm at a show. And I've taken this one and Farm Micro and others to shows as well. Take a look at a couple other views. Straightforward Walther's building, not a lot of customization here, although I did went on the internet and found some Canadian store signs. Pro Hardware, Big V, CIBC Bank, Ken's Hobby Shop comes from, I think, the Walther's kit itself. And then on the interior, down here on the left, you can see peering through some windows. There's some figures in a roomette. There's wallpaper on the wall, some pictures, a dartboard. There's a Christmas tree. And then there's actually a small scale TV hanging on the wall, which was something I got from someone off eBay, which was basically a couple of LEDs behind like an old style flimsy, printed with a TV picture of a soccer game going on, or probably football, European. So that's a little vignette you can look into. And then on the bottom right, I designed the layout for lighting. So the big room we just looked at, so in the middle, off to the right's another bedroom from a lady, and she's looking out the window to see what all the commotion is. Some street lights, some figures, and where the trolley stops in the bottom left is a little shelter. There's some lighting, and then there's a barrel fire there that's done with a old LED candle circuit that I just cut up and then attached the battery power, so it's there warming all the patrons. So this one was the first time I had done any custom bench work, where I actually, with the help of a friend, cut wood, plywood to make the base for it. Interior details using those shadow box rooms and LED lighting. First time I had worked with snow. I tried a number of different things, and then during the pandemic, at least I could get my hands on the Woodland Scenics product. Little out of scale, but it works. It's good enough. It makes for a wonderful snow and fun scene. There's a material I had purchased a while back, a sample of called Task Board. It is, think of it as kind of like a homosode, a fiber-based product, not as dense, but in a variety of thicknesses that you can cut, bend, laser cut, paint. It's a very versatile, interesting material. It's available at art stores or directly from them. But I tried it because I had it. So it was a good idea for curves, much like Ronna talked about using Sintra. And then they used a fire barrel with the candle circuit. So, the fire barrel to me is an interesting idea where, as modelers, we read about what other people did, or you hear about a great idea and you think, I'm going to try that sometime. Well, my sometime came with this micro, and I found an old candle we had on hand and cut it up and put it in. Next, my fourth micro, Lone Pine Station. And this was an inspiration that came to me after seeing what many modelers have done, especially overseas, with very, very small micros and fitting micros into other objects for the fun of it, and bending rail into very, very small radius. I was getting ready to recycle this candle one New Year's Eve a couple years ago, and I looked at it and thought, well, I wonder if I could put, a loop of track on top of the lid, put some batteries inside of it, and run a train on it. And so I thought I probably could. So I went downstairs and I played around with a rail bender that I'd already purchased, using some track from Pico that you can take both rails out of the track. They're not inserted or molded into the ties, bend them to a PowerPoint template, and put them back in to get this very, very small loop of track. And then once I had the loop of track, the rest was just like, all right, so the candle is an evergreen candle. What else can I do with it? And using stuff I had on hand, including the tree, the outhouse, and some bushes and some animals, I created the micro. It's a 4-inch circular base of foam. And the idea for the foam base actually came from the Homes Club. On the wall there on a tour, I had seen they had talked about how they'd done some, maybe it was stone walls, and just slicing foam with a knife, pick it away at your fingers. And so I did. And it was already a gray foam. And then I just went ahead and did a little bit of dry brushing, a little bit of wash. And I had a kind of a base that reflected either stone or something else underneath it. 1.5-inch radius circle. So that is a very tight circle, and that little rail bus runs on it, no problem. HON 30 once again. It's battery powered with a single 1.5 volt AA. There is no speed control, just an on-off switch. At the Springfield show last year, I ran it for the 2 days, and it ran on one battery for 14 hours all by itself. Down to a very, very slow speed where it was basically just crawling around the layout. And everything fits into the candle jar. Where I ended up was, when I figured out I could run it on one battery and carve it out of the foam, etc., I said, why can't I just fit everything into the candle jar? So what I learned from that is I can bend rail to super tight radius as other people have done. I've seen someone bend rail to 23 millimeter radius, where some of the smaller end scale drives will run around that. So basically a 2-inch circle. I carved the foam base. I put the micro into the object, or the candle inspired the micro. I created vertical space with the sectional tree. So with that tree, it's actually 3 pieces. I had the tree, and I said, well, I need to have something other than this layout, or a tree like in the bottom right that's only a few inches tall. And then at the time, my Christmas tree was still up in the basement, and it gave me the idea that said, wait a minute, if a Christmas tree is sectional, I'll just cut a big tree and fit it in. So I cut it down, put pins in the dowel and the wood, a little bit of tacky glue to keep it tacky and hold it in place. And then I just assemble the whole lot when I display it. And everything fits in the candle jar for transport and for safety. Lastly, the fifth of my micros, let's count, and I've got another one going and another one planned, is Windmill Farms. And this one was another of my candle micros that I had saved this candle. And just one day I decided to take a break from other projects and work it up. So it is themed around apples and honey. So there's an apple tree, an apiary, and a little pickup truck that was a Japanese kit, 3D printed, custom printed on its own with its own drive. And I went ahead and figured out to get some height on the layout that I could do much like the tree. I could just build this windmill in sections and it's removable. So it comes apart and it rests in the candle jar, and then everything else fits in the candle jar. So the little apple orchard / apiary with the honeybees and the honey farms sit in the jar. So that is my adventure so far into micros. And since we can't do as much show and tell with micros live and run them and demonstrate them, I've got a few more examples of just what other people have done that have inspired me and kind of give you a flavor for what else is out there in micros. I mentioned pizza micros. Here's another one in HON30. And what I liked about this, it's a very, very simple micro. I think it was 12 inches across, maybe 16, but it's just a wonderful scene, you know, a little rail bus coming to stop at a station. There's several figures, a car, there's a gas pump, there's a little ditch over here on the left, there's the power lines, and it shows even with such a small layout, when you take, you know, time modeling and detailing, you can get some great photos and some great models in a small space. What's also very popular in micros is really not just displaying your micro, and that pizza was well done, it's got a simple base, but here in Typhoon Lagoon on the left, the micro itself is just sitting on this stack of barrels and crates, and I don't know if that's a coconut and a tiki statue and a driftwood sign, but the artist spent a lot of time not only making the micro, but how they display it. And that sits on a table or on the floor, and they display the micro. In this example, both micros have a box that they sit in. The box is decorated to match the micro and to name the micro. So there are a lot of good examples where people not only build a wonderfully detailed layout, they spend a lot of time on its enclosure and making the whole theme come to life in the micro, in the display. What's also very popular is things that are whimsical. In the example on the left, this is a 009 micro, so British 176 scale. And it's a micro of someone's backyard, and there's a figure riding a train, which would be equivalent in real life of, say, a 7.5-inch gauge, like in Strathroy, and going around. And then there's also another small layout that depicts probably G-scale running in the garden. So it's a layout of a layout of a layout. At the Ontario Narrow Gauge Convention last year, Jim had this small micro. It's maybe been a foot by a foot, and it's two G.I. Joe figures standing up next to a layout, and that's, I forget the scale, TT scale or T scale, like 1:450 or whatnot, but it actually runs. So it's a model of these two brothers, friends at a layout, watching the trains go around the layout. So a cool take on modeling a model. Other example is by Derek of this cheese quarry. Mice are quarrying their cheese and avoiding cats that are spread out across the layout. And in ON30, an engine's going around with gondolas full of curds of cheese. So just a whimsical thing, but if you look at the modeling itself, I think these may have been hand carved or molded, the mice. And just the signs, the details, the rock formations, you know, wonderful modeling, being a whimsical scene about quarrying cheese. going vertical, especially in Japan, where micros are very popular because they don't have bedrooms in a lot of their homes, live in apartments, sorry, not bedroom basements, not a lot of space. They're also very good at taking the micros and putting a very large vertical presence to them. And on the left here, it's a very large viaduct where this rail bus is going over. A very tall heritage tree that is probably one of their heritage forests. And just for a layout that is, maybe 16 inches in diameter, it's probably 3 times that height with a little mountain scene and a waterfall coming through it as well. So just, a great scene in a small footprint. On the right is a little whimsical, but a little bit fun and vertical, is this kind of layout between 2 mountains, above some trees, above the clouds. And I think the description talked about kind of like a theme of Game of Thrones and other medieval times, a little bit whimsical because you wouldn't have any railways, but, very well presented. The clouds are very believable, using teased out filament stuff, and the rocks were molded. Just overall great modeling and using vertical space in a small footprint through some whimsical trains. Large scale, I mentioned, are popular 1:35 and even bigger 16 millimeter scale and others. This layout is a very simple loop of an engine facility in 1/35 scale, and part of it's a farm, an engine shed, a water tower. But even with being a small layout, the chosen backdrop, the scenery, the details within the buildings just make it an incredible model. And it's a very simple loop of track and some switching for some locomotives, but incredible modeling at a large scale on a small layout. I mentioned I had done some work with artist panels and people built layouts on foam and other things, but besides the candle micros, I've got inspiration from this gentleman for, he had done a micro in a gumball machine. He had done them in Pringles candles. And despite the presentation being whimsical inside the pinball machine, when you look at a close-up of the model itself, it is very, very detailed modeling scene, a detailed steam engine, cars, people, workshop. It is a great scene that just happens to be probably just over a square foot and resides in a gumball machine. Also from Akihiro is two layouts that he did, layouts in a book. And the first one on the top right was actually, I think, his first one. The two halves of it fold together, and you can see that there's a little spacer in the middle where he puts the trees and rolling stock. And then he custom made a sleeve that makes it look like a box set of books, and it slides into it, and that's how the model is stored. He did a second one, very similar, with 3 sections, with a 4th section with the plaque, that it entirely folds up into the book and gets slid into the case and stores on a shelf as if it's a book, and it's actually a mark roll that unfolds. It's a highly detailed kind of wharf scene where a box cab takes some cars across 2 different places and switches industries with just, incredible creativity and also modeling to be able to do it and then have it actually fold into itself and be transportable as a folded entity. So that was some more examples of modeling and what you can do with micros. It is, to me, a fascinating way to model something different. They're a great way to explore those facets of the hobby without a huge commitment of time or money. Although you could argue when you see some of those detailed layouts, that took a lot of time. But if you wanted to do that on a basement-sized empire, it'd be a lot longer. You can explore different scales, prototypes, and scenery types. I myself now have HON 30, HO standard gauge. I have some ON 30. I have some HON 3. So I've got ideas in all these different scales just to try them and see what it's like to model something different and solve problems and scenery in a different way. They can be the focus of your modeling or a side project. So for me right now, I'm kind of focused on micros. I'm not saying I won't do a basement layout. I've got some ideas for a layout for a bedroom size layout, but for now I'm kind of playing around with micros. And you know, they can challenge or entertain you. Definitely some of the things I've done I didn't do before. It took some time to learn. But definitely I've been entertained, had a lot of fun doing it and sharing it with other people. And, you know, in the end, and I'm not sure what this quote came from originally where I heard it was, you know, as long as you're having fun, you're doing it right. So if you try something, you know, have fun, enjoy it, and it doesn't matter what other people think as long as you're having fun. So where can you get some more inspiration and info? Certainly, there's some magazines out there that focus on micros, and one is called the Micro Model Railway Dispatch. Ian Holmes, a big advocate for micros, publishes it freely. If you search that site or you look for it, it is free. You can download, I forget how many issues, 10 issues so far, including some articles from yours truly. And it's a free mail out, and you download it, and it's got all kinds of micros from all over the world and all different scales that people have done. Voix Libre, which is a French magazine that they do an international version in English, publishes all micro and small layouts, but you will not see decent size layouts in the magazine. It's really a focus on the smaller and the micros in a variety of different scales. I get that magazine on a platform called Zinio, which is one of these online subscription services where you can buy the magazine subscription and they send it to you. And, you know, with that, you watch for a sale, you get the magazine at about 40% off cover price. And then you can buy back issues for as low as $1 all the way back. So a really good way to read magazines, and I read them on my iPad. Last year I went to the Ontario Narrow Gauge show in Hamilton. I forget what it was previously. I had moved. I'm not sure of this year's date. I haven't seen it yet. Last year it was in April, but there's, besides a lot of narrow gauge, there are a lot of micros and a lot of modelers doing very small layouts. So lots of inspiration walking around that show. And then U.S. narrow gauge scene has a lot of conventions, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and out to the West Coast, Colorado, where a lot more of the narrow gauge will also have smaller layouts. Carl's site has been continued. He passed away many years ago, but his layout scrapbook and ebooks that he did are available online at his site. And then, you know, you just have to search YouTube, Pinterest, Facebook groups. They're all there with people doing micros and showing the work, talking about what they've done, sometimes in great detail, you know, how to model a particular drive or how to get it to work, where to buy it from. And so I've learned a lot there, and some just showing pictures of their finalized work. And of course, you're welcome to contact me. I am glad to talk about micros anytime. And, you know, hopefully in a future get together, I can bring a few with me and show you live. So that's it for the presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ken, very much. Super presentation. Certainly got me thinking about a lot of things. While Ken is ending his screen share, just a couple of comments, then I'll open it up for questions. Just to plug, if you would like to see a copy of his article that appeared in Railroad Model Craftsman, he also kindly gave us permission to reprint it. And so you'll find it if you keep the links that we send out to you. It is available in the fall 2023 issue of the WOD's, Railroad Model Inspirations. So you'll find that there. And thank you again, Ken, for sharing that with all of us. And one of the things at a personal level, as I was listening to Ken's presentation today, I was thinking about, wow, there's some real possibilities here. You know, perhaps at some point in my not too distant future, I too will be downsizing as I move from a home into an apartment. It's certainly something that my wife and I have talked about. And now all of a sudden, a whole new world of model railroading has opened up for me. So thank you, Ken, very much for that inspiration. Other comments or questions we can handle for about 5 to 7 minutes or so before we take a break. Anyone, please? Don't forget to unmute before you start.
I found some of the models quite amazing. A lot of little detailed work in it, and nice to put into a larger layout, but also nice to carry around in the car. Excellent. Thank you, Ken.
Sure. Anyone else?
I was just curious where you were getting some of those N-scale chassis. There were. I do ON18, and sometimes I find it tricky to find a chassis for that.
Yeah, so what I discovered through the forums is, has a line called their pocket line. And they're a Cato 109 drive and a Cato 110 drive. And quite frankly, the best place I find to get them is directly out of Japan from Amazon.jp. Or Amazon.co.jp, and you see them sometimes in the US. I have not seen them a lot, but yeah, those Cato drives, number 109 and number 110, are the two that are very popular with modelers. They've got a very small toreless motor with flywheel. They run like clockwork, and I can get that down to about a 2-inch radius. So yeah, even an ON18, you could definitely do tight radius and use those. And ON18 is actually one I'm very interested in as well, because these drives work so well that they'd be great for powering small industrial ON18 layouts.
Just to add in, I don't remember the specifics off the top of my head, Walter, but a couple of years ago, I sourced on the internet a company out of Australia that manufactures and sells just power units at various scales. I was looking for a drive unit for a small micro switcher in HO, but I believe from what I saw that they make quite a range, because being Australia, as Ken said a number of times, a big part of their market would be people living in small spaces in Japan and in fact through Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Other
and
questions?
There's been other hack.
I'm sorry, Ken.
I was just going to add to that. There's been other examples, like you take the Cato Unitram line of trams that they did, pocket trams, and they have 2 trucks that are both powered with very, very, very small drives in them. And people have purchased those and then just thrown away the body and kept the trucks. So that's another idea of where to find small drives. And there's other Japanese company that make drives that fit under units. There's a whole bunch of them. If you want to reach out to me, I can share more of the info I've got on bits of drives.
Super, great. I was just thinking too, anyone who's interested in pursuing this, Ken has provided a great resource. When we send you out a copy of his video, as he mentioned, the table that he's compiled has all the various scales. So I'd be interested to just search on a couple of the scales only and see what pops up. Other questions, comments, feedback for Ken?
Yeah, Ken, thanks for the very nice or very well done presentation, and you've done some very nice modeling.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Brad, you appear to be unmuted. Did you want to ask or say something? This is Brad Izenga, as opposed to just Brad. I don't have just Brad's surname, sorry. Anyone else? Well, again, some super resources for those who want to follow up further will be available through the copy of the video when we send it out. And of course, there's the article that was published last summer and in the fall as well, reprinted. And Ken also mentioned that he's got some articles of his work that's available through the publication that he mentioned. I'm sorry, I'm having a brain cramp. And there will be some research that we can do for the 2024 version of the narrow gauge railroad group. I must admit, I've had a number of modelers in the past 2 months of 2024 tell me how they've gone to the narrow gauge show. So now I'm thinking, in addition to the RPM group that's centered around Hamilton, that I need to broaden myself more. I know one question I had for you, Ken, not to fiddle too much over definitions, but I'm also an armored modeler, and they're very much into dioramas. Would it be fair to say that playing with the quote-unquote diorama concept could very well give you additional modeling ideas and inspirations that could be a micro layout?
Yeah, for sure. And the difference between the diorama and the layout is all the skills are the same in creating it. However, micro, the idea is you actually can operate it. So that's also makes it different from a module, which you anticipate attaching to other people to be able to run in or run together with. Now, you could make a micro that is also a module, but yeah, definitely the key is, you know, you want to be able to operate it, even if it is switch cars on and off it or run a train partly through it. That's a big difference in being just a diorama.
So, you know, great to have lots of inspiration, but if I said I want to actually build a micro, I should probably have clear in my mind what separates a module, as you called it, like the WOD's version, from an actual even smaller micro.
Yeah, it's the key is just you can make it any size. The key is really, are you going to operate it? Because if you don't operate it, then you could say it's a diorama. If you're only going to operate it with others, then it's a module. Yeah, no, like you say, no need to put a point on the definition. As long as you're having fun, have fun and do what you want.
Yeah, and that was a great way to conclude the presentation. Enjoy it. As you said earlier on, sometimes there's far too much arguing for my taste in the hobby, and people kind of lose sight of the importance of having fun. Thank you so very much, Ken. A really great presentation. And I'm just going to take a quick look at the chats. I'm glad to see some people are using it. Did get some feedback from Malcolm Vant, who's up in the Ottawa Valley area. Fascinating presentation. And that's the last that I can see of those relating to your presentation. By the way, to also follow up on a question that came out of or was after the previous presentation by Ron, it's the Western New York clinic that is going to be online, that's open to all members of the NFR, but you must pre-register for it, and they will give you a discount code for ordering your Bar Mills Clinic kit that's going to be available just for this activity on March the 9th. And it's a 40% discount that the coupon gives you. So if you don't have the link, again, go to the last issue of the Flimsy and get Andy's email address and reach out to him, and he'll get things going. Again, the key deadline, if you're really interested in March 19th, is Bar Mills is closing off pre-orders on February the 16th, because they want to make sure that the U.S. Postal Service and the Canadian Postal Service can get you the kit in time to be actually using it before the clinic starts. Anyway, at that point, I will rest my mouth and give you time for a quick bio break. I've got 13 minutes after 11. Ron Tuff is coming back for the last presentation of our morning. Ron, if you're okay, we will start at 20 after 11.
Oh, I was going to share this screen with the flyer for that workshop.
Yes, as people may want to take a break, please do. And Walter and I will work through the screen share. Thank you for that, Walter, as a reminder. So if you want to take a break, please go ahead and do so. We will start with Ron's presentation at 20 after 11. And Walter, are you comfortable with the screen share? Would you like me to walk you through it? Oh, he's there. Thank you. By the way, I'm just remembering, if you're a member of the WOD and you're looking at this and saying, wow, that's really cool, where can I get my copy? Please search back through your emails. I sent out an announcement to all 107 members of the WOD about 2 weeks ago. And as a part of that, you will have a copy of this PDF, and you'll notice that there are links. But again, in order to get the 40% discount, you have to pre-register first with the Western New York division. They have to be able to control the numbers, and they're not going to broadcast the link for the actual clinic to everyone who wants to across North America. So to get the discount, you have to get the code, which means the registrar who's handling this clinic online for them needs to hear from you first. If you can't find that e-blast that we sent out to all of our members, and I'd be happy to send it to anyone else who is from outside the WOD. I know that Malcolm, who is on this call today, he's been involved in helping to get that information out for the SLD division. And I think Malcolm posted it on that division's Facebook page.